So welcome back JWR race fans. Today I've got a race review for you from Donington Park. We had the first round of the 2021 Caterham Championship there a couple of weeks ago, and I was going to tell you how it went. So spoiler alert, but I have got some silverware and some more silverware. So out of the three races, clearly you can see two of them went very well. Let's go into a bit of the detail and I can explain what happened.
James Wingfield steals it.
So at the weekend we had three races. They all went pretty well. I've come away with a couple of podium positions and one race that I feel like kind of slightly got away from me. I guess racing drivers are always a bit like that. We always want a bit more than we got. If I come back with 3 wins, I'd have been happy. Anything else, I'm never quite there, am I? So yeah, overall I have to say it went really well though. I'm very happy with how it's come out. I'm second in the championship, which is brilliant, heading into round 2. But yeah, I was just going to talk you through the weekend, I suppose, a little bit. So yeah, it started on Thursday. We actually do 2 test days ahead of most of these events. So Thursday and Friday testing at Donington Park. Really nice clear skies, sunny weather, not too hot, sort of mid-teens I think, so it was fairly cool weather, but very clear and nice track conditions. So we kind of got really good opportunity to dial the car in and get the driver dialed in as well. To be honest, it's been I think it's been nearly 200 days since our last race meeting, so all the drivers are out there, and to be honest, just happy to kind of see each other and get back in that environment again. But everybody's a little bit rusty, so there's always a bit of warm up to be done. The testing went okay for me. I had a couple of minor car niggles on the Thursday. The front brakes had a bit of a judder in them, so that the wheel was shaking quite a lot. In fact, the shaking of that wheel even caused the front wing stay to crack. So I replaced that and then the discs and the pads at the front as well, and that fixed it for Friday. So yeah, nothing really went wrong on Thursday. Pace wise, it's hard to say where everybody else is, especially on the Thursday. There was no timing at all. I'm lucky because last year we raced at Donington Park on the same layout and I was in the same class, and I actually set the lap record. So my own data store, I've got that lap record lap, so I can compare what I was doing on the Thursday to the official lap record, which is always nice. And I could see that I was actually up in a few areas. I didn't really chase a slipstream. I wasn't really chasing outright pace on testing. So you gain a lot in a slipstream in a Caterham, and I wasn't really looking for that, so I was just driving around on my own. But in doing that, I could see that I was actually faster than the lap record in a good few corners. So if I could get a good slipstream come qualifying or racing, then I knew I'd have decent pace. I'm sure a few other people are in a similar boat, to be honest. The lap records are often set in, or they're always set in racing environments, so not always a perfect lap. But yeah, I was very happy with my overall pace on Thursday, moving into Friday. On the Friday, there was actually live timing at this circuit. I think Caterham had organised for live timing to be present for all the grids, so we started to get an indication of who was fast and who was slow. You can never quite take it for as gospel though, to be honest, and people always play a few games. Some of the quick guys weren't deliberately disconnected their lap timers, so nobody could see what times they were setting and things like that. So you don't really know where you are, but I left mine connected. I don't really mind. I'm just going to go out, run round. Again, I wasn't really chasing lap time particularly, but trying to get that setup dialed in. Similar weather to Thursday, so nice and sunny, fairly cool but very dry. And you can get a really good dry weather setup from that. Although we didn't know whether it would actually be necessary, because the forecast had been pretty sort of secure all the way through the week, saying that Saturday was going to be wet and Sunday was a bit 50-50. So we were kind of doing all this testing, really learning the track, getting settled in as a driver and getting ready for the race weekend. We didn't really know if that setup was actually going to be any use, and as it happened, when we turned up on Saturday, it was a fully wet track, and there was an awful lot of standing water actually. Last year we had an extremely wet race at Snetterton, which you'll see some of the clips in my intro video actually of the big splash, and it was really, really torrential at that point, which is I think as bad a conditions as I've ever driven a race car in. But this Donington qualifying session was probably second worst, if that's the right term. It was really wet. The lap times I think were sort of in the high 30s, so we were doing 1 minute 39 I think was the pole time in the end. which is an awful lot slower than the 1 minute 18s, 1 minute 17s that we were doing in testing. So you can see just how slow it was. I had a wet setup on my car, as I think most people did. The session itself is pretty short this year. The qualifying session is only 15 minutes. So with a wet session, you're always thinking that it's fairly likely there'll be a red flag. Someone just gets stuck in the gravel. Red flag comes out. You kind of lose the 2 minutes of a lap that you're on. You sit in the pits from anywhere from sort of 2 minutes to 10 minutes. And then it's another couple of minutes to get back out before you're up to speed on a timed lap again. So the risk of a red flag taking quite a lot of the session away was always present, and as it happened, that did come to force. There was a sort of a fairly long first stint. I think we had probably, of the 15 minutes, they extended it slightly because of the red flag, which was fortunate, but we had around about a 10-minute first stint and then a 5-minute second stint. So at the point of that red flag, I wasn't really happy with what I'd done. I think I was a bit too close to some of the cars in front, and they were slowing me up around some of the corners, so it was just a little bit messy. I was feeling my way around a new wet track, which obviously none of us knew about, but I just hadn't really got the best out of the car. So I think at that point I was somewhere near the back of the top 10, not really good enough for what I was hoping. But after the red flag, I did a much better job. I got out near the front of the queue, which was good, and we had basically an out lap and 2 flying laps to get the job done. And yeah, I did. I went a few seconds quicker actually in those conditions, so managed to get some laps I was fairly happy with. It was tricky by the end of the session. There were a couple of yellow flag zones, so knowing how much to slow down in those yellow flag zones is always a bit tricky. Different drivers might judge it differently, and at some point the officials could come down on you. So yeah, giving up a little bit of speed in some of the yellow flag zones wasn't really great, but it felt like the right thing to do. And at the end of the day, I think I was about 1.5 seconds off the pace, put me P6. So not brilliant, but I knew from last year, to be honest, that I tend to make up places off the line. I'm not sure exactly why, but I seem to have a good strategy, a good kind of ability to feel the grip as we pull off the line. So I was still hopeful that from 6th on the grid I should be racing at the top for the race come Sunday afternoon. And that is actually what happened. I've got a few onboard clips, and the one off the start shows that I launched from 6th place on the grid, and I was actually 2nd by the time we got to turn 1. Pete Waters made a good start from, I think, 2nd on the grid, so he was leading, and then the guys on the right hand side of the grid, and also 4th place, who was directly in front of me, I managed to leapfrog all of them and get into 2nd place, which was nice. The race itself was still wet, I should say, first of all. Not quite as wet as earlier. We were I think 9 seconds a lap quicker than earlier in qualifying, so the conditions had got a lot better, but it was still a typical wet race, I suppose. Starting to just get a little bit of a dry line through the sort of middle of the track, which was useful, and that was something that we started to use towards the end of the race. But yeah, it was still definitely wet conditions. The racing itself, hard and fair, was good. As I say, I managed to get into 2nd off the line, dropped to 3rd later on, and then we had a bit of a battle through the race. I ended up coming 3rd overall, so first race of the year was a podium, which is awesome. But mostly in those wet conditions, I'd kind of proven that I was going to be there or thereabouts. I had decent pace in the wet, so that was probably as important as the actual race result, if I'm honest. Early in the championship, you want to understand where you fit in. So to pick up a 3rd place behind Pete and Andy was pretty good. Very happy with that as an opener. Into race 2, so on the Sunday morning now. Race 2 was early in the morning, and it was a drier track. In fact, it was basically dry. There was moisture around when we arrived at the track, but I think one session before us, and the sun was out by now, so the moisture, the sort of morning dew, had dried up, and we had properly dry conditions. So we managed to make use of that setup that we'd created on the Thursday and the Friday in testing, put that on the car, and the race start positions always are the finishing positions of the one before. So this time around I started 3rd. Off the line, the launch was okay. What was new for this one is they changed the start procedure slightly, so we were actually going to go off the drop of a union flag rather than the race lights. They'd done that because we had a split grid, so there were some faster 420 spec cars in front of us, so the 7 UK series was racing with us on the same track, and they're much quicker cars, so they were going to go on the lights, and we were going to go at the drop of a Union flag. I think that caused a little bit of confusion because the flag wasn't really displayed, and as soon as it appeared they basically lifted it and dropped it almost at the same time. So nobody had quite so long to settle in and get the car prepped before launching. But generally it made for an okay start. I think most people stayed about where we were. I did get one place, but also somebody else managed to get around the outside at the start. So I ended up staying third, I think, round turn 1, and up into second as we went down through the Craner curves. The early part of that race was fine. I was just settling into a rhythm, racing with Pete and Andy, who were obviously the podium sitters from race 1. Chris Moore and a few others were starting to close in on us from behind. So there was a bit of a train approaching. I think there were about 6 of us in it, all in a line at one point. And it just started to get a little bit closer. So I was running third at that point, and then made a move past Pete into the chicane up to second. And got a good tow on Andy down the start straight, so I went past on the inside into Redgate. Unfortunately, he tried to stay around the outside, and he just came in a little bit too far, and just caused a little bit of contact with us, which, because we touched tyres, the steering wheel sort of jerks and actually jumps out of your hand usually. And his did that, and he went off into the gravel, and mine did as well, and I went through the gravel. I managed to keep it going though. Unfortunately, he got stuck. But I managed to keep going, but by then I'd dropped back down to the back of the top 10 basically. I think I raced back through for a few more places, ended up 6th overall, which I got the fastest lap on that sort of recovery drive, which is something, but to come away 6th when actually I had probably the best, well certainly the best pace of anyone on the track, and was basically in the lead at the time of the contact, was a little bit disappointing. So it was fairly tough to take. I was hoping to get another good result there and put a good sort of dent into Pete's championship lead, but it wasn't to be, so I came away with 6th and a fastest lap, which is an extra point, so not too bad. And it put me 6th on the grid again for Sunday afternoon's race 3. This weekend only we're going to have 3 races. Usually we'd only have 2, but again, as I mentioned earlier, we had that split grid, and because the 420s were with us, we actually had a 3rd race. So we had 3 short races rather than 2 longer races, which was good. It meant that come Sunday afternoon I had another chance for a recovery. So from 6th on the grid, race 3, the launch went well again. Got up into 4th. It was, I think, off the line. So I only gained a couple of places this time, but it put me in the right place to fight through for the rest of the race. For most of the race there was a 4-way battle going on. It was anyone's game really. Lars was back on the pace now. He'd sort of dropped off after a good qualifying. He had a poor performance, I think, in race 1. He recovered in race 2 to win it actually. I didn't mention earlier, but he won race 2 and started on pole for race 3. So at the front there was basically Lars, Pete, myself. Andy was coming back through the pack because obviously he had a DNF in race 2, but showing some pace, and he got to the front of the pack by the end of the race, so it was looking good. And as well as that, we had Harry Cook, who was racing, I think first time in the championship this year, but he was racing with us as well in that top pack of 4 cars basically. And it was all going really well. 3 of us particularly fighting at the beginning was me, Lars and Pete. Harry just behind, and then as we started to become a foursome and just swapping positions all the way through really. It all kicked off though towards the end of the race when the top pack of the 420s were trying to lap the top pack of 310s. The speed difference this year is really high. They've got a lot more power and they've got a lot more grip. I think they're 210, maybe more than that now in terms of horsepower. So they've got about 60 horsepower more than us, and they've got slick tyres versus our road tyres. So really there's no comparison, and they came in at such a rate of knots that the leader of their class managed to get through just into the old hairpin, but then 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th, I think it was, were all trying to come back through on the next straight, and the 5 of them trying to overtake 4 of us predictably led to disaster. I was really lucky. I managed to stay, I was in the middle of the track, I had cars going off left and right, and I was very, very lucky to avoid any serious contact. Andy Lees unfortunately went off to the right, and his car, I think he went over a curb so hard that it actually shut down his car, so when he came back across the track he couldn't go anywhere and was stationary in the middle of the track. Pete had come together with the leader of the 420s, so Pete was off on the left of the track, and they both kind of recovered into the middle of the track as I was coming up to them. I managed to get out of the way, and actually we had another 420 with us at the time who went through the gap. I managed to just slow down enough to get round Andy a little bit. I just touched his rear tyre because he wasn't moving, but I managed to just get a glancing blow and carry on. Unfortunately, some of the cars behind didn't, and I think it was Tom Eden in the 420 hit Andy pretty hard and destroyed, did a lot of damage to both of the cars. As all of this was kicking off, I was basically third. Lars unfortunately got collected by one of the 420s and was left in the gravel, so he dropped to the back. Pete got away with the contact and recovered in front of me, so I was second, but in slowing down to get around Andy, Harry had got in front of me. I was lucky because later on in that lap I managed to actually get back past Harry, and just as I did so, the next marshal's post is where the safety car board had come out. So I'd got back up into second place at that point. The safety car came out, and then we did 2 laps behind the safety car before the race was actually checker flagged under safety car conditions. So that race was a little bit disappointing from a racing perspective, because it was all going really well, really exciting. A lot of chaos, a lot of unnecessary contact, and then a slightly shortened race end. It was definitely all sort of sterilised under the safety car, which was a shame, but from a personal perspective I was glad to escape without any damage. I was also glad to see that all the drivers were okay. Actually, there was a lot of big hits, and I think everybody's walked away really fine in themselves. There's just a lot of damage to fix for the next round. So for me, I 6th and a fastest lap in race 2, and then in race 3 I took that second place. Pete took the win again. I took second, and Harry took his first podium of the year in third. So interesting mix of faces on the podium. I think they had 6 different drivers on the podium over the 3 races. Pete with a first is a strong championship contender clearly, and leading the way at the moment. With the 2nd and 3rd and the 6th, I'm currently 2nd in the championship, so that's good. Looking forward to taking that challenge on through the year. It's also fairly clear though that we've got a number of other quick cars. Lars took a win and was quick in qualifying. Harry was there or thereabouts all weekend. Ben Lopez-Appleton took another podium. Henry Williams showed some good pace at times as well. Chris Moore's always around. I'm not sure if he's doing all the year or not though, but there's a lot of drivers at the front of this championship, so I think there's going to be a lot of hard fighting still to come. And those sort of early big point scores from Donington could well be very useful come the end of the year. So we've got Knockhill next up in about 4 or 5 weeks' time, probably from the time this video goes out. That's up in Scotland, so it'll be a different experience, potentially wet, should we say? Who knows? We have been there once before in the Caterham, and it was a glorious sunny weekend almost throughout. So hopefully we'll get a repeat of that. When we went before, I was actually in a lower spec Caterham. I was in a 270, and also we were running the circuit in reverse direction. So although I've been there in the Caterham, it's not really that relevant in terms of practice. Yeah, looking forward to going back up there. Last time we went there in that 270 class, I managed to get the lap record as well. So Donington and Knockhill both been successful hunting grounds for me in the past. This time round, Donington was good. Fingers crossed that Knockhill goes just as well or even better next time round. So wish me luck. Thanks. Cheers guys, bye.